here. Thanks for having me. I hope you don't regret it when we're done. But what's interesting is today is such a wonderful day to be here. For Sister Alice is here, and everything is really about her today. But what's so exciting for me is when you hear my story, our stories are much more intersected than you know. Because you felt like I care about the world, and you don't even know this part of the story, but the title of my message today is Jesus for Everyone. And so this is where it began. It began on my birthday, May 25th, 1968. I turned 12. I know that's hard to believe as young and as handsome as I am still after all these years later. And so that was 55 years ago. I got home. It was the last day of school, last day of sixth grade. And I got home, and as I walked into the house, I walked into the living room, and my dad was home. My dad was home. He was a general surgeon. He was never home. He was sitting in the living room. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing here? And I realized there was another man in the room. It was Dr. John Grayson, who was president of African Mission at the time, Alex. And Dad says to me, he says, your mom and I decided that we're going to spend the next year in Kenya. And I'm going to take over the mission hospital. And that was the moment my whole world blew up. Like I just thought life was going to be great. I was the youngest of 5 kids. I was moving into 7th grade. I was a good athlete. I was really excited about junior high football, basketball, and baseball. And the next thing I know, I found myself in Kenya. And I didn't know what to expect. But on the first day that we arrived, by the way, we planned the whole way. Couldn't believe we left our family. Communicating with my older siblings that were back in college and high school. We left my brother's senior year in high school, where he was first team All-American in football and baseball, and my parents skipped his senior year to go do this year in Kenya. And we planned the whole way. After we said goodbye to them, we got there, we were exhausted. We stopped. Famous hotel in downtown Nairobi, and we had a hamburger there, and then I had the moment that started the rest of my life. And the moment was this. We walked the streets of Nairobi, and this was 1968, and there were broken people everywhere on the streets. So I remember as we walked out of the hotel after having this hamburger, we turned left, and there was a man who had lost his legs at the hips, and he was walking down the street on his hands. And he walked past us. And then we walked past him, and the next guy was sitting on the street. He was begging, and he had no nose, he had no covers around his eyes, and his mouth was just an open sore. And that was the first person I'd ever seen with Hansen's disease, leprosy. And as we walked the streets of Nairobi, there were hundreds of these people, just people. And it was the moment where I tell people, this is the moment my life began. This is the moment where I went from just being a living being to a living being that was aware that there was a bigger world around me. And this is when I began to see, this was the moment that I learned that Jesus wanted everyone. And so over the years, I would go back to scriptures, and I would go, so where did Jesus demonstrate that he was for everyone? So when Tyler and Alice come back up here in a minute to talk about this vision for Kenya that God has given this special church, guys, you're a unique group of people with a unique call, and you have an opportunity to have a unique impact in the world. This is what every church does. And so I thought, where did this begin with Jesus? And I thought, one of the places that it began was in Mark chapter 5, where I don't know if I can't even remember if I put this on the PowerPoint, but this is where Jesus goes to the impure lands to heal Frankenstein. This is like Jesus' encounter with a person who had been very similar to Frankenstein. This is Mark 5, chapter 1, where it says they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. In fact, would you pull up the map even before we do this? Let's show the map. So this is going to be small for you to see, but you see that little tiny blue at the top? Can y'all see that? That is the Sea of Galilee. Wow. However that got the name of sea, I do not know. But if you go there, it's a mid-sized lake in Michigan. And it's beautiful. But if you look, where you see the brown and kind of the pink and a little bit of the green and the yellow down here, which says Philadelphia, all this to my left is Gentile country. But what I want you to know is if you were to read the whole Gospel of Mark, Jesus spent 95% of his ministry just on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. Like Jesus 95% of his ministry was in an area smaller than Sterling Heights. Like Jesus just came, came small. He just came to this tiny place. He came from a day's walk from Nazareth, but his ministry was just in this little tiny place. And last May, I had 20 guys in Israel with me, and we were out in a boat, and I was reading again through the Gospel of Mark. In the first 10 chapters, almost every story, you can sit in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, in the Lake of Galilee, and you go, Jesus did that there, he did that there, he did that. It's just visually right in front of you. And so, for some reason, if you look where the Sea of Galilee, and you look directly, would be to my left, to the east, right in that valley is where the man that a lot of you who know the Bible know the man known as Legion, who had an uncountable number of demons and evil spirits in him. Jesus went, this whole side is Gentiles. This is non-Jewish people. And what we're going to find is that Jesus, unlike any other rabbi of his time, left the Jewish country, where the God's chosen people were, to go in to the unreached peoples of his world. Isn't that amazing? Did you know that? And so they go across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And it says, when Jesus got out of the tomb, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. And this man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he'd often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. Who does that sound like? Sounds like Frankenstein. It would be a great horror movie. No one was strong enough to subdue him, and night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Now imagine, how old are you, young man? How old are you? Yeah. Can you imagine living in that region, and every kid your age would be talking about the man in the tombs, crying out at night, and you'd sneak out of your house at night with a couple of your buddies, and you'd go to the tomb, right? Because you want to see this guy. And then you get killed. I mean, this guy, I don't know, but he was out of the tomb. Nobody could handle it. But come on, every city, I remember growing up, there was always this house, this crazy guy lived on our street. If you went there at night, he was going to take you in and kill you. This is the kind of and cut himself. And so, I'm kind of having fun with this, but imagine the torment that this guy was under. And when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. And he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you into your spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion." He replied, "For we are many." In fact, I remember when I was a young man. By the way, what is your name? Josiah. So I lived in Kenya about 12 and 13 years. I was your age. I was experiencing all the wildness of Kenya. By the way, Alice, back up in Kajabi, sometimes people would come down into Nairobi to buy meat, but mostly the only meat we had was what we were able to hunt in the plains. So Thompson gazelle, impala, eland, waterbuck, it was a wonderful eating, by the way. That has nothing to do with the message.
So it says that he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of that area. And so a large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs and allow us to go into them. He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. And the herd, 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they were drowned. Now, by the way, this is fascinating. Does anybody remember the Franco Zeffirelli TV series called Jesus of Nazareth? This would have been 40 years ago. Nobody? Oh my gosh. It was like, I'm old. Just forget it. It's like, I'm done. This is the last time I'm ever going to talk about it. So, it really was an incredible. Olivia Hussey played Mary Magdalene. Remember her from Romeo and Juliet? Those of you that are older. And it's like a 10-hour miniseries, and they played it every Easter for years and years when I was a boy. But it's funny, Zeffirelli tried to shoot this scene of the pigs rushing into the Sea of Galilee. And they couldn't get the pigs to do it. Because the pigs were smart. So I was so curious how they were going to film this. I read later that the only way they got the pig, they created this little ridge, and the only way they could get the pigs over is they lined up 4 or 5 backhoes. And they just came in and pushed the pigs over the edge. So all the pigs are like this. They don't want to go. In other words, pigs are so smart. The only way they would have rushed into the lake and be drowned is if God sent them. Here's the amazing thing. Is it amazing that Jesus cast out demons out of a man? No, because he did this repeatedly. What's amazing is he went into the land of the Gentiles, people who were not God's chosen people, to particularly find one person who was broken and hurting in a community where there were pigs, which meant the Jews were not living there. And I remember reading that as a boy and thinking, Jesus must want who? Everyone. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and people went out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there and dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man. They told about the pigs as well. And then people began to, this always blew my mind, they began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. And Jesus didn't let him go. He said, go home to your own people. By the way, I asked Dallas, my first question whenever I meet someone in is, what tribe are you? Nairobi. Are you Kikuyu? And are you part of the Kikuyu tribe? Well, it's like 50 distinct language tribal groups, large groups that live in Kenya. And Kikuyu were very, very important. Jomo Kenyatta, first president of Kenya, was Kikuyu. And so it's a very important people. The first non-English speaking church I ever went to was the Kikuyu church in the Aberdare Forest. And so here I am full circle today, 55 years later, worshiping with a sister from the people that gave me an awareness that Jesus was for everyone in the world. Isn't that fun? It's beautiful. So, but Jesus is not going to let him go. He says, you go to your own people, and you tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. Okay, go back to the picture one more time. I'm going to go back. Actually, one more time after this. With the picture, that whole area to the east of the Jordan River, that's all the region of Decapolis. This demon-possessed man becomes an evangelist of the good news that the kingdom has come, that Jesus goes for one person, and that one person becomes a witness and a missionary. You know who's one of those people for Phos Church? Frank's grandfather. Frank's grandfather had a vision. And it's truly, I hope you write a story about his life, because he felt God was calling him out of ministry to become a missionary. And he finally did this at what, 64 years of age? Come on. Let's give it up for Frank's grandfather. That's amazing. And that's part of the connection, the movement of God along the way. This is how God works. And I want to just identify One word in this story. It says all the people were amazed. This word is, there's two words in Mark that use the word amazed, but this one is to wonder or marvel in admiration. The people admired Jesus, but they wanted him to leave. But then the demoniac was healed. He goes and tells how much Jesus had done for him. And it said, everyone wondered and marveled. So you see, you also learn that God takes a person that's completely broken, that no one has a use for, except to tell haunted ghost stories. And God turns this person into one of the greatest evangelists in the history of the world, to the Gentile world. Beautiful story. Okay, that's my first one. My first question for you is this. How far do you think Jesus would go for you? How far do you think would go for you? Because Jesus travels on one of his longest trips, which is not to the demoniac man. That's just across the lake, like 6 or 7 miles. Not a big deal. But on another story, Jesus leaves the region of Galilee to go to Tyre, which was on the coast of the Mediterranean Ocean. It says in Mark chapter 7, verse 24, Jesus left that place, the area around Galilee, and went to the vicinity of Tyre. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. By the way, I thought about that all my life. I thought, Jesus always tells, don't tell. Like, don't tell right now what I did. And I thought about that all my life. He would heal the leper. He said, go and show yourself to the priest, but don't tell what I did to you. And then you got to tell everybody. You know, nobody ever obeyed that request. But here's what I think, and I'm just guessing here. I think he told people not to tell because Jesus wanted a period of time where he could engage people one-on-one. Jesus was so interested in people. Like every person was a miraculous person to be discovered. And he wasn't impressed with the crowd or the hugeness. He was impressed with encountering and touching people. That's why, you know, when the woman with the hemorrhage of years and years touches the hem of his garment, he stops because he wants to know her. And I thought, I just love the smallness of Jesus and how he engaged people. And here he goes on probably a 4 or 5 day walk to get to Tyre to meet this woman and her daughter. Verse 25, you can see it. It says, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was what? A Greek, a Gentile, a non-Jew, born in Syrian Phoenicia. If you've seen the map, it's way above that. And she begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. Jesus said, first, let all the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she said, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demons left your daughter. And she went home and found her child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. My point, there's so much riches to this. But today, just let it suffice to say this. Jesus goes on a 5-day walk to change one little girl's life. Would you do that? Julius Burgard, Alice, is one of my closest friends. He's Bokah. He's been a part of our church planting movement in Northwest Kenya among the Bokah. Currently he's a senator. He's a senator in the Kenyan Senate right now. But Julius, when we first met, I said, how did you come to Christ? He said there was a friend of his who had become a Christian. And he walked 50 miles to Julius's house to tell him about Jesus. And I thought, how far would you go? Would you walk 50 miles to tell somebody about Jesus? Yes, you would. I was thinking of the original Western missionaries who went to Africa. Does anybody remember how they packed their possessions to go to Africa? Remember how they did it? Alice knows. Anybody else? What did they pack it in? Did they take suitcases? Or barrels? No, they packed it in coffins. Because they knew, because of the roughness of African weather, malaria, the difficulties, they knew that as they go, the only way they were coming back to their country of birth was in a coffin. That's amazing. How far, so the question for you today is not only how far would Jesus go for you, how far would you go? Would you walk to Tyre? Would you do a 4 or 5 day walk? I bet you would. I bet you would. Think of Julius and I think of how far would you go to change your appearance? Hudson Taylor was one of the really wonderful missionaries to China that inspired me as a boy. He was trying to reach the Chinese people, and he was wearing Western garb, and he just was so out of place. He decided to totally change his wardrobe to wear what Chinese men wore. He shaved his head, and he grew a 12-inch pigtail out of the back of his shaved head. Can you imagine what Western Christians thought of him? They thought he was crazy. But he wanted to reach people, and he was willing to grow a pigtail. I've actually been thinking about this. I mean, we could even take the vote today. I have a head perfectly designed to grow hair only in the back of it. And I'm wondering how long would it take me to grow a 12-inch pigtail? Honey, what do you think? Come on, have a little spirit. So, one last time for the map. I just want to tell you, this is so cool. In the map, Tyre, I had to cut it out here, but Tyre is way up on this map, would be kind of almost at the top of the screen to the west of Galilee. So he's up there and he heals this woman. And then the next part of the story, you're going to find that he leaves Tyre, he crosses back through Jewish land, he crosses over the north edge of Galilee, and he goes into Decapolis, into the Gentile region again. He's actually skipping the Jewish part. His love for the people of the world is so radical. So, when you get to this, verse 30 is, she went home, found her child lying in bed, and the demon gone. Then, it says, then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. He literally crosses down, skips all the Jewish region, goes back into the Gentile world. I'm just telling you, we have no idea how radical this is. For a Jewish rabbi, he's literally walking past God's chosen people, his people. And he is pursuing, because he wants the world to know, he wants us to know, that Jesus is for everyone. The illegal immigrants crossing across our borders in Mexico. Is Jesus for them? I'm kind of mad at myself that I haven't gone down and been with people trying to develop church communities, because when we're in Greece with our, Greece is the most overrun country in the world with immigrants. I don't know if you knew that. They cross over from North Africa into Greece. And we have friends, Phos and his brother George, Phos Romeos, and they're like, countries, they didn't know what to do. Totally financially just crushed by these Christian immigrants. And Phos and George have a little Christian ministry, and they go, what does God tell us to do? Love the immigrants. They feed them. They drive them to medical appointments. They've started churches in these tent communities. And Greece gets cold in the wintertime. These people are living in tents year-round, and there's nowhere to go. In other words, because Jesus is for who? Let's answer it together out loud. He's for who?
Everyone.
He's for everyone. And so he skips this region. He goes back into the region of the Decapolis. We don't know where, because the Decapolis, you saw, is a huge region. In verse 32, it says, there some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. They begged Jesus to place his hand on him, and after he took him away from the crowd, Jesus put his finger in the man's ears. I always love this. Like, what's that? Don't you think that's funny? Is there a sense of humor in the New Testament? I think there is. It says that he spit and touched the man's tongue. And he looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, whatever. Ephphatha, which means be open. And at this, the man's ears were open. His tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. So, Decapolis, Jesus traveled through the Gentile cities. And he probably did so much more. But in this little section of Mark, you learn that he's for a Gentile demon-possessed man. He's for a Gentile demon-possessed girl. He's for a deaf and mute Gentile. What's Jesus doing? He's picking the people that have the least human and social capital. And they're not even his people. To show us what he really cares about. And this word open, by the way, the word ephphatha is one word for open, but in the Greek here it says when his ears were open. It's another Greek word. It's the only Greek word I want to talk about today. I'm almost done. It means open. It means anoigo. This word occurs often in the New Testament, and here's where it occurs. Just wait till you hear this. It's incredible. This word occurs for tombs being empty, tombs being open, ears and mouths being open, God opening doors when we pray. Like, when Jesus said, knock and the door will be open. It says if you ask, that God's going to answer, he's going to open. This is the same word. It's of heaven opening in Revelation. It's blind people seeing, having their eyes open. It's jail doors. It's a Philippian jail. When the doors get open for Paul and Silas in Philippi, and an earthquake comes, and the jail cell gets open. This is what I thought. What does Jesus do? He opens doors. He opens lives. He opens eyes, ears, hearts. And then finally, Colossians 4:3, Paul says, pray that God would open a door as he's seeking to bring Jesus to the whole world. This is a beautiful word, noigo. And the last one, actually there's one more in Revelation. This is one of the ones. It's incredible. Wait for this one. You ready? You wait? This is the word is used again where someone, it's one of the living creatures, or I can't remember who it is, comes out and says, who is worthy to open the scroll? And you remember what John writes? He said, no one was found worthy. He says, and I wept, and I wept, and I wept, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll. And then the lamb that was slain comes to open the scroll. It's so amazing. So I just love this. And it says again, as I finish this story of the deaf and mute man, it says, Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. Did they obey it? No. But the more he did, the more they kept talking about it. It says people were overwhelmed with amazement. He's done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So these are Gentile people singing the praise of Jesus Christ. And he's done all things beautifully. So what's our point for today? I think our point is this. I think when Jesus comes to the Gentile world, which, by the way, there might be some people, Jewish descent in this room, but most of us are what? We're Gentiles. We're goyim. We're the people Jesus like bringing into the fold. Isn't that amazing? This is our story. This is our life. And we look at it and it says, let's say what they said. They were amazed and said, he's done everything well. Love that. Jesus is for the whole world. Now, before Tyler and Alice come in, I'm just going to finish with one last illustration. Would you pull up the Joshua Project? This is the homepage. It's going to be hard for you to see. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor today. I'm actually going to beg you to do one thing. When you go home today, make a note to yourself right now, or whatever you need to do, ask someone to remind you. Even call each other up and say, did you do this? I'd like you to go to the Joshua Project website. And here's why. The Joshua Project website is the website that took over from the U.S. Center for World Mission the documentation of all the people groups on planet Earth. And which ones have been reached for Christ, and which ones there have not. Joshua Project lists 17,000 distinct tribal language people groups in the world. And when I was a college freshman at Wheaton College, which, by the way, I played football at Wheaton College. So whenever I say Wheaton College, people usually respond, football powerhouse of the Midwest. Oh, thank you. God love you. Okay. Actually, it's a big joke because we were terrible. Even my buddies, we talk about it. But I discovered this issue of unreached people groups. And When I was 18, there were 10,300 unreached people groups in the world. There are still 7,000 unreached people groups in the world, 49 years later. There's still a lot of work to be done. And we are partnering here in one beautiful ministry that begins to open up our eyes and vision. But I would love for some of you to go and begin praying, because God put Kenya on my heart as a boy. I've been praying for Kenya my whole life. And today I get to expand my heart connection to Kenya through Alice. And this church gets to be a part of the blessing of being connected to that. And for all those that are on vacations and are wherever they are today, that you know that aren't here, you're going to share this moment with them to remind them that Jesus Christ is for everyone. So, when I was in Kenya in 1968, Alice was 3. And I'm wandering this place. I also, with Julius Morgan, my friend, I realized that there were 2 moments in northern Kenya where we came within a mile of each other, not knowing. I came through the city of Kapaguria, and he was up in the hills, and we figured out that I was within a mile of him in 1968 twice. Well, I'll bet you in 1968 I was within a mile of you somewhere as I traveled through Kenya, not knowing that Jesus Christ was going to intersect our lives. So let me close in prayer. Let me